Hello, this is Peaceful Anarchism on the Voluntary Virtues Network every Thursday at 1 p.m. And you could also find me on the Conscious Resistance Network and the Conscious Resistance YouTube channel. So this is part two of our debate between anarcho-capitalism and direct democracy or the existence of government at all, at all. So you want to, all right, so you want to revisit some of the things, to clarify some of the things last time first, before you get into new topics?
From last time, I feel like your position is sort of like teetering on the edge a little bit, because some of the things that you use to define like democracy, you used words like tyranny or of the majority, mob rule, rule of the majority, and you gave sort of insinuations that there's no choice. But then when I came back, I guess we started talking about citizenship and basically the fact that at any point you do have a choice whether or not you participate, right? Like if there's two choices, you stay out of the jail or you go into the open-doored jail cell and throw the shackles on your wrists that have no lock on them. And, those are the two choices. Like if you pick choice two, you can't exactly say that you're an imprisoned man and you have no choice and that your funds are being stolen from you or what have you. Like there is always the choice, being a part of the U.S. is like a subscription service, you get all these benefits, we have dispute resolution, we have public defense and all these things. And so, if you choose to be a part of this service, you have to pay a yearly fee that's deducted from your credit card every year. Or at any point, you can, cancel that service, and at which point, we won't charge your credit card anymore, basically. Mm-hmm. I understand there's like a expatriate tax, but that's a one-time fee, and it's within, when you have a certain level of income, blah, 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 but whatever. So my point is you can't use these sort of like these terms that mean that you're being, things are being done to you against your will when you do have a choice. So.
Okay, so one clarification I would say that comes to mind is, so when you use the term, I remember we discussed it last time also, when you use the term we and us, right? So you're basically, to me, what that suggests is that we are the government, right? In that, the people equals government, right? And I think that's a erroneous notion for many reasons. One of which is that to say that we are the government is essentially to say that, anything the government does has been approved by the people.
That's not necessarily true, right?
Okay, hold on.
Not all forms of government.
Okay, hold on. Wait, hold on. Let me just
keep going.
So whatever the government does is approved by the people or has been done to the people themselves. For example, anything that a government does, let's say go to war, let's say rack up debt, let's say spy on citizens, it's all approved by the people, right? Because we are the government. That's the idea when you say we.
We, right? All aren't. Well, no. I mean, first of all, look, we all are not the government. And so if we were all the government, if all of us needed to approve every single law and every single disciplinary action that went through the system, we'd never get anything else done. There's something called, separation of labor, right? So everybody kind of does what they're good at, and that's kind of like how a free market society works. In fact, if there was no separation of labor, if everybody did everything, there wouldn't be a need to trade, right? If all we were doing is just hunting and gathering berries, and everybody participated in that hunting and gathering process, then yeah, there's no need for trading because everybody does the same thing, and everybody gets about the same thing, and so there's no need for government there. So basically, the whole idea of having representatives is saying, hey, look, we don't want everybody in the country to be worried about all these little details, right? We want a smaller group of people to sort of make some of those decisions, and we only help in the process of selecting the people that make those decisions. We don't actually make them ourselves. So, to have for we to mean that everybody is government, that's completely illogical and erroneous. I don't claim that. That's
okay. Okay, so I definitely agree with the division of labor. That entirely makes sense. None of us or very few of us are entirely self-sufficient to survive on our own. Like in the wilderness, we require the skills and talents of our of our neighbors and our friends in order to survive, right?
I don't know if we require that. I mean, I think it just makes life easier when you do that because people can focus on a few things, and then that makes everyone else's lives easier because they don't have to worry about those things. They can just do other work for people that they don't want to do. So it sort of like it makes everyone's lives go easier when you are doing that. You're cooperating.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the whole idea.
Yeah, it's essential cooperation, and I would actually say that would be the definition of capitalism, which is basically just voluntary exchange between peaceful people,
Sure.
and that over time, as technology improves, as people's skills improve, as new inventions come out, right? So this increases the wealth, increases the standard of living of society as a whole, right? And that actually has nothing whatsoever to do with government. So what I'm saying is that government is entirely separate. Not only is entirely separate from the peaceful trading and exchange of people, but in fact is destructive and is in fact like a leech. It's like
For sure.
sucking
that's
the productivity off of the industrious. This is where I'm coming from. So
okay, and that's completely like the crux of our disagreement, right? You think that is unnecessary, whereas I think that it is absolutely 100% completely necessary to have the structure of government in order for a free market society to even work. So that's kind of where we differ there. Okay. And I think I think we're going to get to that in some of our examples.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So, well, let me ask you, what do you think would happen if there was no government? Let's say, let's define anarchy here. So there is no government. So what do you think would happen? What are you afraid of that you think we need?
I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of that eventuality, but I think that these things would for sure happen. I mean, I don't think that it's very difficult to. I think it's very difficult to dispute that. Anyway, I think my concerns are going to come up later in the video when we start discussing things like, let's see, dispute resolution. I mean, I think those are like some of the most hard arguments that you're going to have to face today are like public defense. I think those are going to be very difficult, but we'll see.
So another thing is, so you're saying that there's people trading, right? And then we need a small group of people in charge of the important stuff like defense and managing the economy and interest rate fixing or whatever. So we need these people to manage everyone else. Is essentially what you're saying, right?
I don't think we need them to manage the tiny little affairs of everyone's like private lives, but I think there are certain important functions that is hard to carry out without a mutually agreed upon central entity with which to do these things. I think it's just not very feasible or too difficult to actually accomplish. But we're going to get into that. I think that's something that we should discuss later because we're definitely going to talk about all that once we get into these like specific examples.
Okay. And also actually one thing that kind of reminds me of is, let's say, you're Nikola Tesla or some kind of forward-thinking inventor who can see a world where people communicate, with wireless devices, right? Or see a world of, let's say Leonardo da Vinci, right? He could see a world of flying machines, right? And then of course all of his contemporaries say, you know what? No, you're crazy. You're insane.
Sure.
That's impossible. That's never going to happen, right? So it's not like he knew exactly what was going to happen or how that's going to come about or how all the details were going to be laid out.
And some of these visionaries were persecuted in means that had nothing to do with government, right? So like Galileo, he thought that the Earth was not the center of the universe, and which completely went against religious beliefs at his time. And he was actually persecuted by a religious sort of structure, not a government sort of structure, right? And that's kind of like I think
church and state was merged at that time, right? Church was the government, basically. That's where they got their power.
Not really. I mean, like people lived in areas where like the Catholic Church had no direct influence. Like the Pope didn't live near them, or there was no like no like religious body that controlled the government near them. The government was controlled by independent rulers. I mean, people just sort of believe that enough people believe that religion was that these religious beliefs were correct and that gave them power, but it wasn't like, some bishop or cardinal was in charge of their like state or anything. I mean, you know what I mean?
So okay, let me ask you a question. So what would you say the difference is between a person who pledges their undying faith to the Catholic Church, or a person who pledges their undying faith to a monarch or the coat of arms of a monarch, or the person who pledges their undying faith into the federal government and the Pledge of Allegiance and the American flag?
So what you're saying, what you're getting at, right, is like these are all power-based hierarchical structures, right? Influencing other human beings and convincing them that you should follow either like a government structure or a religious structure. It's based on power and human influence. I mean, my argument is that like that is not what is the problem. The problem is that, well, quote unquote problem. I don't think this is actually a problem, but this is just a symptom of the fact that power exists. Power is something that happens in human beings. Like, as long as one human being can convince another human being that an idea is true or that they should be followed, then people will follow others. Like, look at Alexander the Great, right? He started out was as he started out as a prince of Macedonia, not insanely powerful. I mean, Macedonia wasn't like a huge nation or anything, but he didn't have like, he wasn't like a godly figure or anything, right? You could disobey him if you wanted to, but people were inspired by him. People chose to follow him. People went to, I mean, I'm sure if you asked any of those guys individually that in 2 years, are you going to be in India? I don't think any of them would have said, yeah, I'm going to just choose to go to India for no reason. No, like they wanted to follow Alexander to the ends of the earth. They would have died for him. And it wasn't like a government structure that forced these guys to go anywhere. They were the army. They could, if the entire army decided, hey, I'm just going to like mutiny and kill this guy, they could have done it, but they didn't.
Yeah.
These sorts of things kind of happen naturally among human beings. I mean, you can't say like, we're just going to suddenly all get rid of religion. People are not everyone's going to agree with you on that. But religion's going to continue to exist probably till the ends of time.
No, that's true. I don't contest that. And I don't contest that people are always going to seek power, and that there's going to be those who lust after power. That's completely understandable. I do understand that there's a minority of sociopaths in society who are always going to seek to dominate and control others at the expense of those people, right? The problem that I have is when you create an institution that we call government, where those types of sociopathic people tend to become attracted to in order to focus their their power. I have a problem with that. And one sociopath in a padded room is not a threat to me. But when you put him in a position of power and millions of people really truly believe that this guy has power, then you have a problem, because then you have millions of people that die as a result of him, not only dying for him, but people who die as a result of the wars that he creates, like in foreign countries, right? So this is a big problem when you give people power. So the way I look at it, it's not that some people are corrupt or that some people shouldn't be given power. It's that nobody should be given power, and so we should not. It's not about like the Game of Thrones, right? It's not about who should sit on the Game of Thrones. It's the fact that the throne exists at all. That's the problem. That is the problem. When we don't give people a conduit to focus and hone their evil, their sociopathy, I don't see where the big problem is. I see in that kind of society harmony is what I see.
Okay. I mean, two points of disagreement. So one is that I don't believe that everyone who enters public service is like an evil person or a wrongdoer. Like, I feel like there are people that they want their life focus to be helping others, right? And that's what a lot of people that go into politics are. They are actually like just noble, like public working people. They want their livelihood to be spent creating things and doing things that benefit people other than themselves, and they don't want that life to be focused on profit. I mean, that is just the case, that there are noble people that do this work. Now, there are some people that get into politics for less than benevolent reasons, right? But one benefit of democracy is that if such things are like found out and made public knowledge, there are measures in place by which those people can be evicted from office, right? So that is one thing. And the other thing is that if we get rid of all these structures, right? If we just say, hey, we're going to start over everywhere on the entire world, we're just going to get rid of government, right? Problem is, like, it's not always given to them, right? Like, nobody said, yo, nobody, like, in the current government said, yo, we want Adolf Hitler to take over. No, Adolf Hitler got enough people behind him, convinced enough people that his ideas were correct, and then he just took it by force, right? And so, like, I believe that that would just happen eventually. If you had an anarchistic society where, hey, we're going to just, like, a bunch of us are going to agree that we don't want government, somebody's going to say, you know, there's going to be some external evil to point to, hey, look, Russia's getting too powerful and we need to band together to stop them. And so I'm your man, I'm your leader, and I'm going to guide us to victory. And it's just going to happen, right? I mean, that's just my feeling, is that if you just try to create a society without government, government would eventually come back, just because we need ways of managing this territory that we all call the United States. And government is sort of like the most centrally powerful way to do so. Like, if you basically just say by decree, we need an army right now to stop this outside force, that's a much better way of doing it than saying, hey, all these like privately interested companies with their own like margins, and they're all their own CEOs with their own ideas spontaneously have to decide to essentially fund this defensive force that somehow is much more difficult. That's my point.
Okay. So yeah, there's a few things. So, the way I look at it, right? It's not like there's these things that are necessary. There's certain things that we have come to believe because we all grew up in a society completely dominated by government. Like, we can't imagine what a society would look like that had a completely free currency, right? We can't imagine what a society would look like that had a completely free
Well, actually,
defense agency. We can't
actually,
imagine.
a lot of times countries don't have their own currency. Like, look back in the Middle Ages and stuff, where like a lot of other countries used Roman currency because they had a stable value. And so like these countries, like, like the Roman, I forget what the name of it, denarii.
Denarius, yeah.
The denarii.
Uh-huh.
Like that wasn't their own currency. Like that country didn't have the ability to back that currency because like they could just disappear tomorrow if the barbarians invaded or whatever. But they all fixed on the Roman currency because Rome was a powerful empire. They weren't going to go away. It had a stable value, blah blah blah. So it wasn't always like a country instituted its own currency back then.
Okay. No. Well, I'm saying now, like growing up now, we can't imagine what a society like that would look like because we're completely immersed in a government-controlled currency, government-controlled education, government-controlled defense department. We can't imagine what it would look like to have private defense. Like, what does that mean, right? So it's really difficult to imagine. But I think one of the errors in reasoning that one might commit is the logical fallacy of ignorance. So if I can't imagine it to be so, therefore it cannot be so, right? So I think this is a major problem that that completely how you say renders moot, or how you say it's like it renders impossible the idea that something better could be made that we cannot conceive of. Like if you tried to force somebody, if you tried to force somebody to create Bitcoin, right, or create the internet, or create I don't know, create a cell phone. If you tried to force somebody to create that, that would not be created. Things like that are not created by force, right? They're created by people who innovate and create things, as a means for perhaps enriching themselves, right, for profit,
All right.
and then
Yeah.
as a result they enrich society. So we all
Okay.
benefit basically.
But like on the other hand, you can't have these very simple things that we have in our everyday lives, and you can't like there can't be no known way of making that thing work in order to go with a proposal. Like I'm not just gonna blindly close my eyes and just trust the fact that like we'll figure it out somehow. Let's go with anarchy. We'll be okay. Like we need to just kind of like have an idea of how that might be handled, so that we just like jump off the deep end with a little bit more faith. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think again that goes back to the abolitionist movement during the 19th century, right? The abolitionists did not know what a society would look like, or they did not know how a society would function absent slavery, right? But
All right, but that's not actually
nevertheless,
no. That's not actually true though. Like, I mean, historically, there have been societies that were slaveless, and they
okay.
were.
Well,
Okay.
I'm talking about major Western industrialized countries. At that time, most of them were slave producing societies.
I mean, that's actually
supported
not
by
100%. I mean, yeah, but like the North, I mean, sure, they benefited from like the cheaper cotton from the South, right? But for the most part, the North was more industrialized and had way less slaves. Like they were making the leap into the industrial age, and the South was behind, right? And that was kind of the whole idealistic argument back and forth was like, hey, like the North is like, hey, I don't think we need slaves anymore. We have these factories that sort of accomplish a mass amount of labor with little input. Like we can do without the people slaves because we have machine slaves instead. You know what I mean? So that's what the North ideal was. And the South ideal was, hey, we have plantations, we want to protect them. So I disagree. I don't think that this is a good example. I think that like there can't be an ambiguous answer to the question, how are roads going to work? Or how am I going to get myself to work every day? Like those need to have unambiguous, clear solutions to them, or else we can't really deem your proposal as a actual sound proposal. We have to say, hey, this doesn't work. So let's get to some of these things.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. So well, yeah. So we can talk about those things, but I just want to preface it by saying that I think again when you're stressing for a clear, detailed outline of how a stateless society would work, you're actually treating the economy as if it's man-made, right? And the economy is anything but man-made, right? It's just like a jungle, right? It's formed spontaneously between people who are transacting, right? Regardless of the numbers, right? So something like that, not only is it not man-made, but any intervention that some control freak in a government office will attempt to to construct or enact a law to meddle with it would inevitably end up worsening the situation and damaging people along the way.
See, I think that's completely wrong. So like the major problem, well, one of the major problems that I see with anarcho-capitalism is that government creates demand for things that are not profitable, and some of those things are necessary. So, for example, public defense. So, government, the way that our society works today, government creates artificial demand for weapons that are used for self-defense. Now, if this was a completely free market society with no government, I don't think there would either be an unhealthy demand for weapons or not enough demand for weapons to keep our society protected from outside force, right? So weapons don't really generate profit directly, right? Like I'm going to build 50 tanks. How is that generating profit, right? Like a private company, why would I be building tanks as a private company? If my goal is to make money as a company, why am I going to build tanks? It is for either one of two purposes, right? It's either to use those tanks to generate profit, which means like using them forcibly to take over other companies or something, or I'm just buying tanks for no reason and I'm losing money. And if there's no war to fight, if there's nothing to defend, those tanks are wasted. So like in a supply demand market, there needs to be demand in order to create the supply. And what is the demand for weapons? Like if I'm demanding weapons, what is that for, right? Is it for, as a private company, that's like, it's either a waste of money or I'm going to use the weapons for something.
So you're
And
saying
using the weapons for something as a private company is like a dangerous idea, right?
so you're saying if there's no government, then nobody would have any weapons, or we wouldn't need weapons, or what? What are you saying?
Well, what I actually think would happen is that big businesses would militarize in order to further their own interests. Is what I think would happen.
Okay, all right. So maybe this is a good segue into talking about a little bit of a stateless society and hypotheticals.
Sure.
So we should just say that of course we have no idea how this would happen because there's not really too much precedent in history to draw
Yeah.
from. So this is entirely mostly our speculation.
Sure.
Using the knowledge we know up until now, right? So
Right. I want to start with easier ones though,
right,
because
go
I
ahead.
think we can get into like the really tough ones later on. But let's start with some of the ones that I think you could have a reasonable response to in a relatively short amount of time. So let's start with roads. So like, how do you think that roads would work in a stateless society? What's your proposal for that?
Well, I don't think that's actually entirely a complicated thing because
Okay.
we already do have private roads. You look at like mall complexes, you look at plazas, you look at Disney World, right? All of these are private roads, right? And so
Uh-huh.
so the difference when you look at a private road and you look at a public road, so
Uh-huh.
so there's this idea of the tragedy of the commons. Have you heard about this concept?
Well, you can explain it
Okay.
for the
All
purpose
right.
of
All
this
right. So tragedy
conversation.
of the commons is the idea that when something, when a resource is publicly owned, as in it's owned by everyone and it's owned by no one, um, then the incentive is not to take care of that resource, but rather to exploit it, right, and to abuse it, because nobody has a personal vested interest in taking care of that resource, right? Nobody is entrusted to take care of it, right? No one person.
Mhm.
So as opposed to if things were privately owned, you own things yourself. Of course, you want to take care of your possessions, right? So whatever you own, your house, the land you live on. Let's say you own a lake, you own a lake, and let's say you want to get fish. So you have a personal vested interest not to overfish in the lake, right? Because you want to make sure there will be future fish, right? So you allow the lake to respawn, things like that, the fish to reproduce. So that this applies to basically anything, right? Most things that are publicly owned are mostly trash and abused and just destroyed because nobody really cares about it. Why would you care about a government, road? Like, who cares? Not many people care. But when it's their own, when they have their own money on the line, oh, okay, then people care. So in this sense, you look at the difference between private roads and public roads, and you can clearly see a difference in the amount of maintenance, the amount of care, that how neat it looks. Just look at a private road like in Disneyland. It's amazing how you don't see potholes there, and if you do,
Okay.
they don't take months and months to fill
Okay.
up the
So
potholes.
what you're talking about right now, you're talking about roads that are near to a business and sort of affect that business's bottom line, right?
Yeah,
So like
yeah,
that's the important quality of the private roads that you're speaking of.
yeah.
The types of private roads that I'm speaking of are roads that would necessarily go through like the private land of an individual person, right? So like let's say you as Danilo Cuellar own the private property that goes up Dunderberg Mountain, right? Like geographically, it makes the most sense to build a road along your property because it's the shortest path to get to something of importance, right? So there necessarily needs to be a road through your property. And let's say you're the type of person that doesn't really want people driving on your property. Like, what happens then, right? Like, or let's take a even more severe example. Let's say you own the property that goes through like the Cumberland Gap in Tennessee, right? And so if you don't drive through the Cumberland Gap, you have to go like 50 miles west or east to get around this mountain, or you have to build some kind of tunnel. So let's say you just don't want people driving through your private property. Or let's say you know that people have to drive 50 miles out of the way if they don't drive through your private property. So you're going to charge $10 a head, $10 a person to drive through your property. And you know they're going to pay it because it's going to cost them $15 in gas to get around you. So what's the solution there? Like, what is going to happen
Okay.
if yeah, these people owning private property just do not want roads in their private property.
Yeah.
That's a
So
reasonable thing, right?
yeah. So yeah, I've heard this argument. Some people say, what if you buy roads all around my house and then say if you trespass, I'm going to shoot you. like, what are you going
Yeah,
to do?
well, that's a
Yeah.
whole nother thing, right?
So
Trespassing.
yeah, I mean, this is basically what you're talking about, right? Like you own a road and nobody can go on it. So one thing we have to keep in mind in a stateless society is that there is no taxes, right? No taxation, and also no control of the currency, right? So inflation, as we understand it to be, is entirely a government um, uh, phenomenon, right? It's only essentially comes about through central banks and currency creation and interest rate rigging, right? So in a stateless society, there will necessarily be a more stable currency, and people will be wealthier since they will not be robbed through taxation. Okay, so it's
That I
true.
think that's an arguable point. I don't think you can make the clear argument that people will definitely be wealthier. And by people, I mean all people. Like, I think there will be some people that will get wealthier in your type of society for sure. I don't think that people will be wealthier, though. I think that's a very arguable point. But go ahead.
No, no, that's true. That's true. You're right. Not all people will be wealthy because maybe everybody has different incentives, right? Some people, are inventors and
The
entrepreneurs. Some people.
militarization of big business is basically what will cause people to not be wealthy. But keep going.
Okay. Okay. Well, what I'm referring to is minimum wage laws, actually. So the existence of minimum wage laws significantly destroys employment opportunities for those people with less skills, right? We have right now, in most states, I think minimum wage is like what, $7.50 or $8, something like that. So those people who don't have skills to meet, that limit. Let's say they want to work for $5.
Mm-hmm.
They can't because it's against the law.
Mm-hmm.
So either they work off the books and the employer risks his livelihood, or they just stay unemployed,
Mm-hmm.
homeless person, or they get unemployment, further,
Mm-hmm.
creating a tax burden on the people who are actually working and paying taxes. So
Mm-hmm.
so those people who want to work, like most people, most people want to work. So if a person is starving, right, they're making $0 an hour, they have no job, right? So
Mm-hmm.
obviously a person like that wants food, okay, and they
Yep.
understand that of course you can steal food from a store owner, but obviously that's not a sustainable business practice.
Mm-hmm.
Being a thief is not sustainable, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the best and most long-term way to ensure your own survival is to work to sell your labor, right, for money, right?
Uh-huh. Right.
So most people would want to work, right? So making $1 an hour is better than making $0 an hour. Making $2
Right.
an hour is better than $0 an hour, right? So
Sure.
without government restricting employment opportunities for these lesser skilled people, there will necessarily be more people working, therefore less unemployed, less homeless, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so taking that back to the roads, the fact
One
the
thing I would
fact that
say before we continue, I'll
okay.
let you get back to what you're saying. But one thing I would say is that not everybody, not everybody is constantly aware of every business's business practices, right? Like when I buy a bottle of Tide bleach from the supermarket, I really have no idea how. I mean, I could look it up if I wanted to, right? If people have done the journalism on it, but without inspection, I mean, I don't really care to know like necessarily what the working conditions are at the people that are making this bottle of Tide bleach. Like, I don't necessarily worry myself that much about the business practices of the CEO of that company, or I'm basically like mostly concerned about what, I guess if I was a more casual consumer, I'd care about what the packaging looks like, but I don't really care about that. What I really care about is the bottom line price and the components of it, like what ingredients are in this bleach. That's really what I, as a consumer, am usually cared about. People buy from like Walmart all the time, and mean like if you look into what Walmart does, like as part of their delabeling process, they actually they employ third parties employ prisoners, right? To like delabel all of their things before they get resold, and they pay their employees really, really badly. I mean, if they could pay them like less than minimum wage, they would, and people would accept these jobs because like employment is kind of in bad state currently in the economy. I mean, what I'm trying to get at is basically if businesses have bad business practices, it's not always public knowledge, especially when not all of this stuff is like always reported on, right? So,
Okay. All right. So now you're getting into like like let's say like that reminds me of people who talk about overseas sweatshops and how
mhm,
that's essentially what they consider slave labor, right?
mhm.
Um, and
I
so
buy products that say made in China all the time. I hate
yeah.
to say it, but I do.
Okay. So so the way I look at employment in general is people are compensated for for the skills that they have at the moment.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
so let's say a person decides to work in McDonald's, right, for whatever it is, I don't know, $8 an hour, right?
Hmm.
So they are voluntarily working in McDonald's. They sign the contract. They show up
Hmm.
to work. Nobody's forcing them to go, right? They're
Yep.
voluntarily deciding to work in McDonald's. If they knew that they had better opportunities working somewhere else, they can make more money. I don't think they would continue to work at McDonald's, right? I think they would take that, right? People
What if
always,
McDonald's? Okay, what if McDonald's owned lots of machine guns, tanks, airplanes, nuclear weapons, and they came knocking on your door and said that you're working for McDonald's? Would you work for them?
that sounds like a government actually. That doesn't really apply.
That sounds like a militarized McDonald's.
who would be pulling the triggers of these many machine guns? So McDonald's has an army all of a sudden now.
Yeah, well, the people that McDonald's is paying to hold those machine guns, right? I
All
mean,
right, all right.
they're a big, powerful business.
Okay. All right.
Mhm.
So it seems like one thing that you envision would happen in a stateless society is that maybe monopolies, right? Well, one business would rise up above the others, maybe buy all these guns and tanks and warheads and then just
That's certainly
dominate everyone
possible.
else, right?
Before that is one thing I want to get to.
Okay.
But before we get to that, I want to get to dispute resolution. So,
Okay.
how do you envision dispute resolution working in your stateless society?
Okay. All right. Well, let me correct you right there. It's not going to be my stateless society because
Well,
I'm
in
not
the
the
one that
ruler.
you're proposing, right? You're proposing a
Yeah.
difference to the
Okay.
status quo.
Okay. Good.
Let's go with a system other than democracy.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
in the system that you're proposing, how do you propose that dispute resolution works?
All right. So just let people know this is just my opinion. This is not,
Right.
there's no certainty whatsoever, right? It's just hypothetical opinion. So yes, dispute resolution is a very fascinating topic because that's one thing that many people consider to be you know necessary, completely necessary for the government to control courts, the court system, the legal system, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so essentially the way I see it, right, in a stateless society, without laws, without regulations, enforcing or forcing people to act in a certain way, right? What would reign would be in
Well,
my
what
in
I would say is like measures of handling negative behavior that we all kind of agree on, but go ahead.
okay. Okay. So and I think you can see this even now, like when you go to a doctor, let's say for example, most people think you have to go to a doctor that's licensed, right? Has a state license, that's important. Who would ever go to a doctor, somebody who claims to be a medical practitioner who doesn't have a license, right? That's crazy, right? But I don't really think that people essentially care about a license. What I think people mostly care about is reputation. Like you don't, when you go to a new place, right? You don't just, like, most of the time you don't like pick at random between all the doctors. Most of the time, most people would ask maybe their neighbors or their friends, do you know anybody who you can recommend that you like, right? And so
Hmm.
to me, what this suggests is that people value reputation, credibility, right?
Yep.
Much higher than any state license or permit or certification, right? So
Uh
essentially,
huh.
what these papers do is all they basically do is, again, just like the minimum wage laws, they completely shut out a portion of the population that perhaps, just talking about doctors, perhaps they may be better practitioners than licensed doctors, but maybe they don't have the time or the money to go to like 9 years of 9 years of schooling and get into
Hmm.
massive amounts of debt in order to get that ridiculous piece of paper.
Okay.
So
So what you're saying is basically dispute resolution could be done in a anarchist society
I
because
didn't even get to that
certain
yet.
resolvers are going to have generate a good reputation for themselves, and basically people are going to agree to use these guys who are fair because the fair guys get a good reputation. Is that kind of what your argument is?
Okay, okay, so any kind of business, right? Businesses can prop up, and they do now today anyway. In various fields, right? You can make people make businesses out of anything. In Detroit right now, there's you can basically say there's anarchy in Detroit right now, right? There's a significant number of people have left Detroit, so the tax base is being completely destroyed. So the police basically do not work or do not, enforce the laws in Detroit, right? So a lot of people are afraid of Detroit. So what has propped up in that absence is this company is called, I think it's called the Threat Management Company, and it's basically a private defense agency, and so their business is in defense, is in securing people, protecting businesses against looters, against thieves, against anybody who would be who would attempt to harm them or their business, right? And that's their business model, right?
And you can afford that if you have money. If you have, let's say you're a middle income or rich person, maybe you can afford the service. What if you're a poor guy that can't afford the service and are being looted or robbed or killed or
Okay, so actually, I would characterize that as a as the appeal to pity, okay? Because you're basically saying that there's this guy that's destitute and has no resources, right? And I don't know what the circumstances is around why he's destitute, why he has resources, because there is reason. There always reason why people are like that, right? That's what we have to discover, right? So barring all that, barring knowing the reasons, I should feel pity for him due to maybe the poor decisions that he made in his life, right? So basically, you're saying
maybe he made the poor decision to be born crippled or mentally challenged or what have you. Maybe he made those poor choices and he doesn't have a lot of money, right?
Okay. I mean, I'm not saying that there's not going to be handicapped people. There's not going to be people who can't work, people who are disabled, and actually in that situation, what I do see is even today, even with most of people's income that's taxed away enormously and inflated away through currency creation, even in this situation where we are significantly impoverished, there is many charities that people donate to help the needy, right? I think that it is in people's general nature to help one another. We always tend towards charity and helping one another. So in this sense, to force somebody to help somebody, like for example, Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid or any kind of forced charity, right? This basically destroys people's natural inclination to help, because people do want to help, and so I perfectly understand a society, or perfectly see a society that with those kinds of people who just can't work because of unfortunate birth, or maybe they had an accident or whatever. I don't think they're just going to be left on the side of the road to wither away and die, because people are compassionate. That's the way I see people.
Sure. And I think that certain societal functions are reasonably left to charity. I mean, there are the necessities and then there's the nice to haves. So like if I'm a poor guy and my home gets invaded and someone shoots my wife and I don't know who did it, I don't want to hope that there is a sufficient charity with which to raise the funds to properly investigate and find out who shot my wife. I don't want to leave that to hope or chance or the generosity of my fellow man. I don't want to leave those types of drastic situations that demand justice, demand response. I don't want to leave that to hoping that someone else is nice enough to help me out. Like if someone invades my home and kills my wife and is rich, I don't want that guy to be able to hire a bunch of thugs and get away with it. Like I want a system by which those types of situations are handled and treated equally, no matter what type of resources I have. Now, I know you're going to say it's not, things aren't treated equally in the current society. People are, of other races or what have you, and the system doesn't always treat them equally. And to that, I would say, no, we don't have a perfect system, but we don't have perfect people enforcing the system either. So you at least have the theory of a strong system in terms of justice when it comes to these drastic crimes, and you're not depending on exterior, the generosity or the optimistic, hopes of your fellow man helping you out when there are situations like this. I mean, it's just, I don't think there would be sufficient charity to cover these types of situations. It just would not happen. But that's just my personal thought.
Okay. So okay. All right. So talking about dispute resolution agencies, right? So one concept to understand, which is very good to understand, is that of restitution versus retribution, right? So our current legal system focuses on retribution or revenge or vengeance
Not
on
really.
the person.
It's not like eye for an eye or anything. It's not like somebody kills my wife, I can go kill them. That's not
No.
Not
Not that you do it, but I'm saying that the courts do it. Okay, so
don't
let's
kill
say
people. I mean, unless it's like completely severe and only certain states. But like basically, the way that things work in our current society is that you do horrible things and you do some jail time or you pay some fines. It's not like we're completely getting back the value that you took from society by killing 15 people or something. We're not ever getting that value back.
Okay, but I'm saying I mean, it's hard to characterize murder. Let's say robbery, right? Let's say let's say some guy stole, I don't know, $500 from you, right?
Yeah.
And let's say this is a stateless society, right? Let's say somebody stole $500 from you, and so also another thing that most people would have, since there would be so much competition, so much the wealth again would generally be much higher than we would understand.
Well, I think a lot of your arguments suppose that, which I think is a very debatable point. But I think a lot of your arguments, a lot of your defenses are supposing people are generally well off.
Because
I'm not
of the
sure
absence of taxation.
That,
that's the only reason. Because of the absence of taxation and inflation. That's the only, because those two things are government created phenomenon. That's the only way that government supports itself, right? Through inflation and taxation is the only way. So
yeah, but I think that the militarization of rich individuals plus rich businesses would counteract some of that public wealth.
Finish up with the example. So somebody steals $500 from you. So you have your let's say you have your defense agency or your insurance company, and you would like to find this person. And so, and you have a reasonable idea that it was Bob, right? And so you approach Bob and you say, I think you stole it. And he's like, no. So then you have the two insurance companies or dispute resolution agencies coming together and figuring out one of them investigates the Bob and finds evidence, and they go back and forth, right? So it's in this kind of scenario, it's always in their best interest, and it's always more efficient in terms of spending less money to resolve the situation peacefully and non-violently, right? Because once you resort to violence, it is very expensive and it is very destructive.
Not that expensive if you kill the guy. You just pay your mercenaries a one-time fee. Look, let's say I'm twice as rich as you, and let's say my dispute resolution service is 20 thugs, and your dispute resolution service is 10 thugs. I'm just saying, there's no need for me to be civil about it. Let's say I just want to make sure that you don't win, right? Okay. The whole point of a dispute resolution is that you secure some kind of punishment on me. What if I don't want to be punished and I have a lot of money?
All right. No, that's entirely possible. It's true. And what I'm saying is, in a stateless society, what would reign supreme would be credibility and reputation, right? So the only way, we already established before that there's division of labor, right? There's division of labor, so no one person can really be self-sufficient, right? So we all are interdependent on each other. So for one person
not exactly true.
For one person to get an army, or a small army or a group of thugs and try to terrorize other people and kill other people, you can imagine that the businesses that are surrounding that kind of person would most likely not want to trade with such a barbaric and evil person, right? And so
Unless they don't have a lot of choice.
what will essentially happen? What do you mean won't have a lot of choice?
Well, I mean, if I'm in charge of a business big enough that other people can't afford to really not do business with me, like let's say I'm the CEO of the Dutch East India Company or something. Well, that had government backing, but let's say I'm just like I'm extremely dominant in your area. I have control over a lot of the trade that goes in and out of India, let's say, and let's say I decide to rape some Indian woman and then shoot her husband. Like, nothing's really going to happen to me necessarily because everyone else needs to still do business with me. I mean, there may be some kind of like armed revolt, but aside from that, like if I have iron grip control over a particular market segment, like I can kind of do what I want. You know what I mean? It happens.
Okay, so the first thing I would say is, does that happen now through the government? and
So the thing about government is that we have, like, if people do that in government, if they are doing illegal things, if that gets found out, we have means of evicting those people, right? Like, basically, the rest of the system is supposed to kind of obey what the people want, and if it doesn't, then we have big problems. So, basically, the difference there is that you have a system in place to deal with the people that exploit the system in theory, right? In practice, yeah, do some people get away with this stuff? Sure, it does happen. Do we have, perfect people implementing all these aspects of the government? No. So, I would say that, sure, like some negative things can happen with people that are given a bunch of power, but if you have means by which to deal with these people, then that's different.
Okay, I think this goes back to what we discussed in the last video, which was we just touched upon. I don't think we went into detail. Does the president have responsibility for murdering people under his administration? Who is responsible? Sure. Let's say, okay, so all the people that are murdered in Iraq, right?
That's not murder. Hold on, you're talking about people that fall in combat. That is not murder. Like, so that is not on our books. So
what is it?
Murder is the unlawful killing of another member of society. Unlawful, right?
So us invading a foreign country is lawful?
Not against our laws, right? It's not against our laws.
Okay. So it seems like you're using legality as a yardstick for morality.
Yes, and actually, all morals are a function of society, right? So, like, killing other people is only bad because we all agree that killing other people is bad. Like, if we didn't all agree that killing other people was bad, then it wouldn't be a crime, right?
So, okay, explain that a little more.
Like, basically, morals and laws are both functions of society. Mm-hmm. So, like, because we all think that killing other people is bad in most circumstances, then we outlaw it. But if we didn't think that killing other, like, let's say there was some other reality where killing other human beings was fine, right? Like, you could just kill someone and people wouldn't generally really care about it. Well, in that case, we probably wouldn't create a law about it, right? So, like, things are only bad because we think they're bad. Like, if I think that killing people in Iraq to defend our freedom and defend our country or whatever, or like, if I think that that's not wrong, then there's not going to be a law about it because I don't think it's wrong and a bunch of other people don't think it's wrong. So it shouldn't be illegal. It shouldn't be considered murder because most of us don't think that that's wrong.
Okay. To which I would say the Holocaust was legal. Slavery was legal, and Jim Crow laws were legal, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So to use legality as a yardstick for morality, I think is highly erroneous.
Well, look, people didn't think that slavery was immoral back, 250 years ago. Slavery is only immoral because a lot of people agree that slavery is immoral, and once that started to happen, then it started becoming illegal. You know what I mean?